Hello, heathens! I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the Witch's Wheel of the Year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. Welcome back, witches. It's been a couple of weeks, technically speaking, right? Since we have been here on Ye Old Podcast. So thanks for coming back. If you haven't, let's just jump right into all of the stuff, right? Let's just jump right in, but to all of the stuff. Okay. If you haven't already watched it or noticed or paid any attention to what is going on in the world of witchcraft, it is Lughnasadh season. It is Lughnasadh season. It is Lammas season. It is Loafmas season. We're in it, my friends. It is officially Leo season. It is going to be Virgo soon. We are in the very heart of summer. And if you haven't already, please go watch the podcast or listen to the podcast on Lughnasadh. I have a 2-hour class up here. Wherever you listen to this podcast, you can also watch it as a video. There's slides and commentary and my beautiful face, glowing and radiant. Let me tell you, I actually look really good in this video. So it's a joy for everyone, honestly. If you haven't listened to that or watched it yet, go do so. Check it out. Get caught up to speed because we are in Lughnasadh season. And this is the season of doing stuff. This is the season where we move away from, like fully and completely, we have left behind experimentation, in a sense, in spring. And we have come into the season of summer, which is about claiming and stepping into responsibility, stepping into processes that make us mature and accept the responsibility of our life, and move into that power in those spaces. And so as we move through Lughnasadh season, we are going to have intimate conversations with those concepts. So if you have been working with me for a long time, you know I've taught these classes in a bunch of different forms. They used to just be live classes, at a church on Broadway in Capitol Hill in Seattle, Washington. And then we moved down to Mortlake and Company, which is an incredible occult resource here in Seattle, Washington, run by the esteemed William Kiesel, who is the mastermind behind the Esoteric Book Conference, aka the Texts and Traditions Colloquium, and on and on. And that was a really incredible thing. We opened it up to creating big magical altars in the class, and being able to do more stuff in a group setting. It was really cool. And then the worldwide panini hit, and we moved online. And that form has had several different iterations, and the classes are in yet another iteration, and there may be yet another iteration down the road. And I really appreciate that you all have stuck with me, or if you're new here, welcome to the madness. But I really appreciate that you guys have stuck with me, because I do feel like there is a golden thread of effort, if nothing else, through all of that stuff. And I have evolved in my understanding of this material quite a bit. My understanding of it and my conceptualization of it has broadened, and it has become much deeper. I have moved through space and time working on this stuff, and it's been really incredible to do it with you all. at the same time. It feels really special to be a solo witch, and yet I'm not alone. We are all in this together, and we're all working on this mystery and sort of dazzled by the wonder of this incredible stuff that our ancestors have been doing all of this time, and the gods and goddesses and the great archetypes and all of that stuff, the forces of the universe. Um, it's all feeling very big right now, and big can be overwhelming, and overwhelming can be frightening. But Lughnasadh season is a time that asks us to step into our power and step into being brave, step into being certain that we can get done the work that is asked of us. So, in the midst of all of that, let me say that I have been still refining what it is that I am trying to offer to myself and to you and to the universe. And this podcast, I refer to it as an experiment. And it is still an experiment. And this week, we are going to try a slightly different format. And I would really love and appreciate some feedback on it as well, if you are so moved. So we are going to organize the podcast a little bit differently this week than how we've been doing it for the last while. I don't know, year and a half. How long have I been doing this? And we've tried other forms before. I've experimented with organizing the information in different ways, adding more information, taking some information away, all of that stuff. So we're doing that again this week. I just want to see how it feels. And I really appreciate you coming along with me for that. Because it is a type of experimentation, and I know we're only supposed to do that in spring, although also, what is time? It's spring somewhere, right? But also, again, I don't necessarily think of this as experimenting all the time as much as I also think of it as refining. Um, and refining is a word that is subtly entwined in a lot of the work that we are doing in Lughnasadh season. We are collecting the gold of our efforts, but it is also the sweetest and the best of the gold of our efforts. And in that, there is, for me, a spirit of refining or coming to just plucking out the very best parts of things and really savoring them for maximum if effect, maximum deliciousness and maximum pleasure, which is certainly something that Leo season is dedicated to. Okay, this is an incredibly long introduction to tell you that things are going to be slightly different. Obviously, some things are going to be very similar in that I am long-winded and, and I go on and on. So let me actually get on with the podcast. Okay, some things that we talked about the last time that we actually had one of these. It was Lunar Week 24. We are now in Lunar Week 26. This is Lughnasadh season, waxing moon in Scorpio. Lunar Week 26 by some lunar calendars. The last time that we got together, we were talking about the Lughnasadh class. It is up. Please go watch it if you haven't already. Check it out. If you are wanting access to the book and the calendar that we refer to in class, you need to sign up to my Patreon at the $9 a month level or higher. And if you just want access to some of the slides that are shown in class, the new moon and full moon stuff and sky guide and things like that, you can sign up at the $5 level. If you sign up at the $23 level, you can get multiple free readings with me throughout the year to kind of dial you in on doing this wheel work in your own spiritual practice, pagan practice, witchcraft practice. And folks that sub at the $66 level and higher can get readings with me every month. We look at your astrology transits and all of that good stuff. Okay. Other things that we talked about in the last podcast that I want to touch on before we get into the meat of this one. I did mention that I am going to be running my Welcome to Tarot or Tarot 101 6-week intensive. I have pushed that back by just a couple of weeks, but it is still happening. Folks that are subscribed to Patreon will have first dibs at signing up for that. It's probably going to be longer than 6 weeks. So there's that too. My 6 week guide is going to be more than 6 weeks because that's what I do. And then folks that are subscribed to my newsletter will have a chance to join, and then it will be advertised to the masses at large. So my newsletter is free to sign up for. My Patreon signs starts at $1. Patrons absolutely get discounts as well. So there's that. Save yourself a little bit of cash. We will be supporting and donating 10% of the sales from that workshop to the European Roma Rights Center. We talked about that before. We'll talk about that again in the future. If you want to just read more about the current Sabbat, you can go to my website, and I have a big old page on Lughnasadh, its history, that kind of stuff, as well as some writings dedicated to that season, specifically working with the Sun card and the Strength card. I also, for patrons, have 2-hour classes on each, the Sun card and the Strength card, and the Hermit card as well, which we will get to in Virgo season. If you want to know more about all of this stuff, you can sign up to my irregular newsletter. It's irregular because I send it out whenever the hell I feel like sending it out, honestly. And ultimately, before we get into the meat of it, let me say so many thank yous to the people who support this podcast. If you would like to support this podcast, you can join my Patreon and get a ton of benefits. I mean, if you think I go off here in the podcast, imagine what I'm giving people who actually are supporting me in that way. If you're feeling especially heathenish, though, and I know that you are, you can give this podcast a rating wherever it is that you listen to it. And one of the most amazing ways that you can celebrate and support this work is sharing it through social media, for whatever good that is, right? But really, that and telling friends, telling family, telling coworkers, telling the people in your life that you think might appreciate this work, or get something out of it. That's my favoriteest, is when folks, I guess, trust me to and share this work with their people. Okay, let's get into this biatch, shall we? Okay. All right. First things first. Let's get ourselves oriented in this season. We are in Lughnasadh season, also pronounced Lughnasadh, also called Lammas and Loaf Mass. This is also first harvest, and that is because we are seeing the grain harvest come to fruition all over the Northern Hemisphere. And this is the first of 3 harvests. Our second harvest is at Mabon, and that's fruits and veg. And our third harvest and last harvest of the year is Samhain, or Halloween, as you may know it. And that is the blood harvest. Of course, it's fucking Samhain. It's Halloween. It's going to be goth and spooky. So, okay. So what are we doing here at Lughnasadh season? Our witches' work is really focused on themes, holidays, and deities and archetypes that are concerned with power, maturation, leadership, and production. And when we look around the planet at other holy days and festivals, past and present, we see a big emphasis on authority, wisdom, fruition, and ancestor work. And for me, all of that stuff sits very comfortably together. They're kind of different ways of saying the same stuff in a lot of ways for me. So let's look at some of the holy days that we have for this week. Before I talk about the astrology, I know we normally start off with the moon stuff. We're going to get there. Just hold tight, guys. It's going to be all right. We got this. I believe in you. It's going to be good. I believe in me too. So let's talk about the holy days that we have in this week. Well, first and foremost, I want to talk about the Celtic tree month of Hazel or hazelnut. Now, hazel is one of the 9 sacred woods that is referred to in Druidic and other sort of Irish slash Gaelic slash Scottish, Welsh, Celtic, quote unquote, folklore and myth and magical practice and all of that stuff. Hazel is one of the big sacred woods of those magical traditions. And hazelnut connects us to the planet Mercury. Um, why am I talking about this first? Because we are just stepping into the tree month of hazel, and that's, by some methods of measuring, we're stepping into that. Yeah, there's some gray area there. And that's something, as an aside, I may be adjusting this in the future when and how I talk about the Celtic tree months. But I think it's really interesting information, so I don't want to leave it out. Anyways, we are stepping into the Celtic tree month of hazel or hazelnut, and this connects us to the planet Mercury. Now, one of the chief things that's ascribed to hazelnut is fertility, but it isn't so much fertility in the sense of like the Empress, um, or that like Mother Gaia thing. It's more like vitality and life force, which also could translate as virility. Um, but virility in the sense that, all genders and all people can sort of embody this sort of turgidness, and vitality and life force. Hazelnut connects to myths and symbolisms around sacred wells and sacred water and sacred springs. In Irish myth, there is a story about the salmon of wisdom eating hazelnuts from the sacred hazel tree. And so this uh, tree connects us to practices around magic, wisdom, knowledge, and divination. And that's all stuff that is really potent and important for us during Lughnasadh season as we move through Leo, and then again, or ultimately, as we move into Virgo season, Virgo being ruled by the planet Mercury. The tree month will last into Virgo season. So it starts now and runs into September. Um, and it really is sort of directing us, in a sense, to kind of think about and look at this portion of Lughnasadh as being focused on, like, hey, we need to step into our vitality, our life force, and really embrace our magical power to summon the information and the wisdom that we need to be able to do this work, to wield our power wisely, and then, to ultimately be able to do stuff in the world with it. And again, as I said before, we get lots of opportunities throughout this holiday to think about that stuff from a bunch of different perspectives. Okay, so that then brings me to solar Lughnasadh, or solar Lughnasadh. Now, if you look in any old Wicca or paganism book out there that discusses the 8 Sabbats of the Wheel of the Year, generally speaking, Lughnasadh or Lughnasadh is placed on August 1st, or August 1st and 2nd. And that is a fine time to celebrate this holiday. There's nothing wrong with that at all. You also see a whole heck of a lot of holidays dedicated or situated around the last Sunday of July or the first Sunday of August. And of course, picking Sunday makes a lot of sense here in the heart of summer, in Leo season, Leo being ruled by the sun. So, yes, that all kind of checks out, right? Okay. So, what is solar Lughnasadh? Well, in Earth's orbit around the sun, you could divide that circle up into 8 pieces or 8 points, like on a compass. And where solar Lughnasadh sits is halfway in between summer solstice and Samhain. It sits halfway in between, I don't know, probably 2 other holidays. I don't know what I was going to say there. There goes my brain. Good day to you, brain. But anyways, uh, one of the things that can be really confusing about looking at this from a purely like spiritual kind of surface level, modern, I guess, adaptation perspective versus something that's like really dialed into the historical perspective or the astronomical perspective or the astrological perspective is that we have a calendar that's static. We have a calendar in our modern era that's very just like there's 365 days, they're in the same order, and that's that. They don't necessarily have anything to do with what the moon is doing, and they only kind of have something to do with what the sun is doing. Um, and when we hit solar lunosod, we are literally, or the sun, I should say, is literally at 15 degrees of Leo. And it falls approximately August 6th, 7th, or 8th every year. Now, what's really interesting about that is that we have a lot of potent holidays that fall at this same time, but particularly old Lammas. So there actually was a time period when Lammas was celebrated on the 7th. So there was a way for our ancient ancestors to, most likely using megalithic sites, actually math out, the exact degree point of the sun in its arc across the sky, aka us in our orbit around the sun, whether they understood that mechanic or not. Um, and so that's happening here. So this speaks to a larger conversation that I touch on throughout the year as we work the Sabbats, which is that there are some Sabbats that kind of need to be celebrated at a pretty specific time, like summer solstice, right? You kind of have a 3-day window for the solstice, and it's not really going to be the solstice if it isn't on those 3 days. And really, kind of the center day of those 3 days is the hot spot. But the greater Sabbats, quote unquote, or the cross quarter holidays, which are Imbolc, Beltane, Lughnasadh, and Samhain, tend to sort of be more like a big season that then is stopped or started by one of the solstices or the equinoxes. And so for me, particularly with the cross quarter holidays, I feel like you have a big stretch of time that you can celebrate that thing or venerate or observe or work your magic or what have you. So first and foremost, this week we have solar lunosod on the 7th. Um, and also on this day, we have a very interesting Slavic holiday called the Feast of Volos's Beard. And I want to talk a little bit about this character Volos because they're actually kind of dope. They're pretty sick, pretty dope, pretty cool, pretty rad. Um, I got a bunch of this information from a really cool website that I found called Lukomori Folklore, WordPress.com. Um, and I'm going to leave a link in the description of this podcast to this WordPress page because I just really was like stoked on all of the research that this person did on this deity, Volos. Now, this holiday, the Feast of Volos's Beard, connects us to a bunch of other holidays that are happening this week. We have the Puck Fair in Ireland running from August 10th through 12th. We also have the Fire Festival of Tan Hill from our Celtic friends and ancestors. And we also have the Druid Fire Festival happening at this time as well. So all of these are kind of echoes of each other, and they all kind of connect back to another deity that we talk about a lot, specifically at this very point in the year, named Crom Dubh, who is celebrated at Crom Cruach. And Crom Dubb's name means the dark, crooked one. So, who is Volos? Let's talk about this character. So, Volos, also known as Velez, um, is a god of cattle, nature, merchants, fertility, the underworld, death, music, magic, trickery, medicine, the earth, water, and pastures. Yes, that is a lot, but he can handle it. He is one of the most important and prominent gods in the Slavic pantheon, so much so that pretty much every single pagan historical site that has been found throughout the Slavic region, or Eastern European regions, really, because it's up into Russia as well. Is there's traces of worship to this deity, so a big deal with this character. Their name connects to a bunch of really interesting stuff. One, hair. He was said to often take the shape of a bear or a wolf. Um, and so obviously both of those are pretty hairy characters. And hair in Slavic folklore is connected to or is a symbol of prosperity, abundance, and general well being or vitality. In fact, the city of Volosovo in the Leningrad region shows Volos or Veles on their coat of arms, and he has a bull on one side and a bear on the other. Okay. So this cat is a god of all that stuff that I already said: nature, cattle, merchants, fertility, music, death, the underworld, trickery, magic, waters, earth, medicine, pastures, all of that stuff. And and this is important because right off the bat, we're seeing a whole bunch of stuff there that connects us to the god Mercury. What's more is that Velos or Volos is often called the shepherd of the dead, and takes a serpent form. Check that out. Now, coming back to that hair thing, wool is another way of translating some words that are very similar to this god's name. And what's interesting is that he is depicted as a black serpent lying in a nest of black wool at the roots of the world tree. Um, so there's that symbolism embedded in this deity. And then also his name or versions of his name can be translated to mean humid or wet. And this is also fitting because his domain is said to be in the water beneath the tree stump and the log. And those of you who study or practice Slavic myth and Slavic paganism are very attuned, I'm sure, to all of our really potent bog goddesses and bog gods. Bog being literally the word for God or deity in a lot of those traditions. So, pretty interesting stuff. Okay. Volos was often described as an old man with a long beard. And that was one of the things that also really stood out for me because, of course, we know good John Barleycorn, one of our pagan archetypes, and folk or myth characters, is a name for barley, the golden grains in the field, and his beard, quote unquote, is the shaggy strands that grow at the top of the stalks of grain. And so it's literally that he grows his beard and then he's shaved of his beard. So that kind of really stood out to me, that like his long beard was sort of a big deal. This character is also connected to holidays like Maslenitsa and Kolyada, which we talk about at various times of the year, spring equinox, winter solstice. So, there's something there where this character has something to do with those big time markers, right? But ultimately, Volos is a chthonic deity, again, being connected to the underworld, ancestor work, magic, mysticism, divination, all of that. He was also very closely tied to hunting culture, and hunters called the Pleiades Volosinia after this god. And his constellation, the Pleiades, or this constellation, excuse me, the Pleiades was really important in calculating the correct times to hunt the bear. Now, what's interesting also is that the bear constellation, Ursa Major, where we find the Big Dipper, this constellation is also called the Plough, is best seen in April and May, which is Aries into Taurus season. And the constellation looks upside down for us that are here in the Northern Hemisphere. And then there are stars in that constellation that point to Regulus in Leo and Spica in Virgo. So the Bear constellation itself is sort of this type of timekeeping seasonal clock thing in the sky. Pretty cool stuff. I was like, really? Wait a minute, this is cool. So moving on, um, last bits of information about this character. There are some really interesting rituals. I should say this as well. The Slavs in some cases have done a fantastic job at preserving pre-Christian tradition in Christian tradition, and so there's a lot of saints that are absolutely connected to Velos or Volos, that carry through a lot of imagery. But there are some really interesting rituals associated with this god. In southern Russia during the harvest, it was customary to tie the last handful of the ears of grain into a knot and leave them in the field. We see this tradition throughout Lughnasadh season. This was called plaiting the beard of Veles, or leaving a handful of ears for Vela's beard, which I think is really cute. I'm sure that rhymes really nicely as well. This was done as a gift for Volos, who they believed had granted fertility to the crops. In some areas, a loaf of bread was left amongst the knotted ears of grain, which is probably reminiscent of sacrifices given to Volos in earlier times. And we also see offerings of bread as a really, really big deal in this season. You gotta love that, honestly. That like the pagans are like so into it that they literally have an entire holiday just dedicated to I fucking love bread. So last but not least, little notes about this character. They were also a protector of traveling musicians and a god of magic. And again, for me, that really ties us closely to Mercury and Hermes and a lot of the stuff that we see and learn through that deity. So there's this very interesting thread at this time of year. Even though we're in the heart of Leo season, Virgo is like right there around the corner. That's like, are you done yet? Are you done yet? It's my turn. Let me go. Let me go. Last things, Volos was one of two deities, the other being Perun, to whom oaths were sworn. And we just talked about Perun. Perun is Volos's rival. Velas was the antagonist, but really they kind of represent opposing forces in nature. And to me, this is very reminiscent of our Holly King and Oak King imagery that we have. You know, but again, Velos is kind of looked at as maybe like the weirder one, or the one that's on the outside, or the one that's causing the problems, or the one that is like usurping power or trespassing in some way. But ultimately the two deities fight, they clash, and all is brought back into balance at some point, just to do it all over again next year. I highly recommend reading more about this god. There is way more to talk about than what will fit in the scope of this podcast. Super cool stuff. And just like really cool Eastern European history as well. Again, they've done a good job at preserving and maintaining a lot of that stuff, and it's really cool. Okay, let's move on to, well, a couple of the other things. Actually, there's no moving on. There's no moving on. So we're here forever. This is what I want to say. I mentioned these holidays already, but I'm going to mention them again. We have the Fire Festival of Tan Hill from our Celtic friends and ancestors. We have, let's see, the Feast of Volos's Beard. Obviously, we just talked about that. We have the Puck Fair in Ireland, and this is dedicated to goats, but it really is sort of ultimately hearkening back to Lughnasadh type festivals. This is one of the oldest festivals in Ireland. And goats have beards. And so that also really kind of came through pretty strongly for me. It was like, wait a minute, goats have beards. And then, of course, our Druid Fire Festival. All of these kind of link in. And then if we look backwards in time, on August 10th, we have the feast to Hercules Invictus from our Roman friends and ancestors. And this is ultimately Hercules when he finally dies. Again, we have this imagery that's carrying through from the last few weeks around like John the Baptist and Crom Cruach for Crom Dub and all of these other deities that represent a deity at their height and then falling down, or at their height and then becoming dark in some way, or crooked in some way, or trespassing in some way, or what have you. And I think that there's something really important in that imagery in this season, because when we are working this magic, when we are working this symbolism for ourselves, we are in a sense sort of saying to the gods and goddesses and to the ancestors, I'll take it from here. I'm willing to take the risk and like take responsibility for this thing that's going on myself, for example, or the situation around me or the world at large. And come hell or high water, for better or worse, we're doing it. We're going to try it. We're going to see what happens. We're committing to this action and we're going for it. And you can make enemies doing that sometimes. You can piss people off or step on toes, or tilt people a little bit by having the audacity, right, to step out and say, I think I know how this is supposed to work. And as an echo of like some of the funky stuff that can come through with that, we also have the bombing of Hiroshima and the bombing of Nagasaki that happened in this same week, right? So it doesn't always work out. It's not always good. Um, so that's what's going on this week for Holy Days. Just that, no big deal. Just some pretty casual stuff. So now I want to talk about our astrology, and then we're going to talk a little bit about tarot, and then we're going to talk a little bit about spellcrafting and magic that we can do in this week to really dial in on this particular iteration of the work that we are doing here in Lughnasadh. Alrighty. Now, looking at the astrology that we are working with this week, we are starting off with a waxing half moon in Scorpio at 4:06 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day for everybody else around the planet, and it is at 13 degrees of Scorpio. So, when we're dealing with moons in Scorpio, no matter what, it's going to pull up stuff around power, power dynamics, our relationship to power. And that stuff alone is really potent, right? Then we can bring in context around those of us who are living in the United States are dealing with the Pluto return of the United States. Pluto, of course, is the ruling planet of Scorpio in modern astrology. And it connects to the judgment card in tarot. So, it connects to the judgment card in tarot. Pluto does. Scorpio connects us to the death card. So, no matter what, when we are dealing with moons in Scorpio, there's some buzzing, there's some potency there. Then also, we have the lunar nodes are in Taurus and Scorpio. So this week is also kind of bringing us into, some of the astrology that kicked off Lughnasadh season. We had Mars conjunct Uranus conjunct the North Node in Taurus, opposing this point in a sense. And so think about our Lughnasadh stuff: power, maturity, being asked to wield power, being asked to flaunt power, even. In Leo season, we are prideful, and we are boastful. And, sometimes that's the right thing. And sometimes everybody's like, shut up, right? And sometimes we should shut up and sometimes we shouldn't, right? Sometimes we need to be loud. So this season is a time when we get to call all of that stuff into question in turn. And this waxing moon in Scorpio in particular really asks us to focus on power and revenge and how we deal with that stuff, right? What happens when I give you a bunch of power? What happens when you seize a bunch of power for yourself? What happens when the village or the community looks to you and says, we want you to be the leader? Is there a thing in you that's like, blah, ha, ha, I can finally get my way on XYZ? If there is, you're a totally normal human. So there's that. Um, it's okay to think that stuff. It's not necessarily okay to act on it, though, right? Like, that's not why we're not necessarily being put in charge on behalf of the group to go satisfy our own ends. And when we do, well, we get the modern world, right? Like, look around our planet and look at the way that things are working currently in the corporatocracy of the Western world. And you can see what happens when people get power and then focus on their own desires and focus on their own satisfaction of those roles and those archetypes within themselves from a most base place. Um, and so this moon is like, hey, can we sit and like think about that for a little while? And also, we might be handed some situations where we have to actually deal with it, right? If we have placements in Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo, or Taurus, they are either square this waxing moon or they are opposing this waxing moon. And so it might feel a little personal for a day as the moon is passing through this sign. Or it might just be something that we reflect on as we see it in the world, but it's there, right? And again, in Lughnasadh season, we're being asked to take on responsibility. We're being asked to embrace power on behalf of the group. And that can bring up funky stuff for us as individuals. Sometimes it can even bring up issues around revenge, and I'm going to get mine. So this moon is really asking us to kind of think about that and to deal with it. Um, Moving into the week, on the Sunday the 7th, we have two pieces of astrology that in some ways emphasize a lot of this stuff. First off, we have Venus in Cancer trine Neptune retrograde in Pisces at 25 degrees. And then we also have Mars in Taurus square Saturn retrograde in Aquarius at 22 degrees. So there's our Taurus and Aquarius thing. And then on the very next day, on Monday the 8th, we have the Sun in Leo trine Chiron retrograde in Aries at 16 degrees. And we also have Venus in Cancer opposing Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 26 degrees. So, what's up with this stuff? Well, looking at the Mars square Saturn and thinking about our Lughnasadh work, Mars square Saturn can feel stuck and can feel frustrated. And we can feel very passionate and full of drive and full of fire and like ready to go, ready to show off, ready to be loud, ready to be hot, ready to be offensive about it and argue about it and fight for it. And the situation just putting a big wet blanket on us and being like, no, I don't think so. That's Saturn. Just a big no from the universe. No, I'm not going to give you any place to like expend that thrust or effort in any sort of reasonable way. So it's a day that can feel very frustrated. We might feel really, really stuck. And then the next day, we've got Venus oppose Pluto. And that can be a day where we feel extremely competitive, where we feel where we are acting in sort of like some obsessive or compulsive ways, because Pluto really brings up a lot of that kind of like, I'm super hyper focused on this thing. We might be really focused on what we don't have, right? What we've been denied or what we haven't had access to or what we've missed out on. And that sits very comfortably, not comfortably, with that Mars square Saturn. That's like, you're stuck, you're frustrated, too bad. And then on the other side of that, we've got these nicer, quote unquote, trines, right? And And so, where this can go sideways, where this can get real funky, is if we lean in too hard on the gnarly parts of Mars square Saturn or Venus opposed Pluto. It can really be a day where we are super fixated on what we want and screw everybody else. And I'm going to wield this power to get what I want. Right. And then think back 2 days to that moon in Scorpio. That's like, hey, what are your attitudes about when people give you power? Do you just like go and do whatever you want, or do you try to like help the group? So the astrology of the weekend could really make things potent, right? And like up in your face with that stuff. These other two transits could help, could make it a little bit nicer, and they also speak to an extent to our Lughnasadh work. The Venus trine Neptune is very dreamy. It is very luscious. It is very beautiful. It's peaceful. It's loving. It's artistic. It's creative. It's very spiritual. It might be very romantic. Um, it's kind of a day where we are just like, I want pleasure. Thank you very much. And then the following day, at 1 p.m., I didn't say the times before, but I don't know why. But Sun, Leo, trine, Chiron, and Aries at 16 degrees. This can really help us sit and be super honest with ourselves in this work. So, Chiron speaks to our personal wound, our wound that is derived from wisdom. And so it might be that we are handed some power, we make some bad choices, and then we get to reflect on that. and we're willing to see where we messed up, and we're willing to see what would have been a better course and how we can do better. There are probably a lot of us out there that can do that kind of work. Um, but but what I really recommend for this particular astrology is like, and I've said this a lot in the last couple of months, but man, it's just been spicy astro after spicy astro, month after month, plus everything that's going on in the world. If you need to, put yourself in time out. And that Mars square Saturn is going to make it probably kind of hard to remember, oh, right, I can put myself in timeout, because you're already going to feel like you're in timeout. You're like, I want to get out of timeout and go do stuff. Damn it. But like, what's one of the metaphors I always say? Like, go move a pile of bricks from one side of the yard to the other. If you need to expend some energy, if you need to deal with the frustration that day might bring up, or if you are really fixated on some stuff with that Venus opposed Pluto situation, and you're like, I can't stop fixating on this, go do something with your body. Go for a walk, go for a hike, do something that is going to make you come into the body, sweat, move in whatever ways are safe and healthy for you, right? But bring that focus out of the mind and into the physical body. Do something in the physical world to get your mind off of it and get your emotions away from it for a little while if necessary. I should also mention, derp. Oh, right, I'm doing it in this form for the first time. It's not going to be perfect. Oh, yeah. Shut up, Virgo moon. It's me. I'm Virgo moon. Oh, God, help me. Monday the 8th, we have our gibbous moon in Capricorn at 1 degree, and it hits that at 1:44 p.m. in the afternoon. So right in the middle of all of that stuff, the Capricorn moon is like, hey, get it together, right? Like, mellow out, get your shit together. No, when we've got this gibbous moon in Capricorn, what it's really asking us to do is step into your worth, step into your power. I know I keep saying this, but it really is emphasized over and over again in this season. This is a moon that focuses on growing your self-worth and really coming into a deeper understanding of what you have capacity for. And I love all of this work together. Collectively, what are we looking at here? We're looking at being given power or asking for power or taking power or understanding what our inherent power is in a situation, maybe being tempted internally or externally to like be less than ethical with that power or that capacity, that responsibility. Having some astrology that really challenges us to come into a very like I, me, mine kind of way of thinking about stuff. When this is not it's kind of the season for it, but it's not the season for it at the same time, right? Lughnasadh is like, we really need to know I am a badass, but I am not just a badass for me. I'm a badass for us. I have these cool skills and these amazing talents and all this stuff that either I was born with or that I've developed in myself. And that's cool that I have it for me, but I really have it for us, like to utilize in the world somewhere. So we have all these days that really challenge us on that stuff and ask us to like dig in on how we feel about that kind of work. What's been asked of us in the past? Maybe we have a lot of resentment around being a leader or having to be the most mature in the situation. And that opportunity to like fuck off and like I'm going to get mine is like, well, yeah, I finally get a chance. This is a great time to investigate that narrative. Is that still true for you? Or was that true when you were 16, but you're in your 40s now, or your 30s, or your 50s, wherever you are? Um, Looking at my algorithms, these are the people that I'm talking to. But you know what I mean? Right? And that kind of work isn't pretty. It's not fun. It's funky. So also with the what are we doing with the Venus trine Neptune on Sunday, the 7th, there could be also a tendency to just be like, you know what? I don't want to do any of that. I'm going to like blow bubbles while laying on my back in the grass. Screw you. I'm not having this conversation. It's been a hard year. I get it. In whatever way feels right for you to press into this conversation, this is the season that we are in, is understanding what it is to be a leader and to hold this responsibility and this maturity in community. That's what's up. And it's not pretty work sometimes. It's funky work sometimes. Okay. For our lunar body work during this time period, when the moon is in Scorpio, I am very much encouraging you to plant or transplant, also as a means of one, exorcising that energy, right? This like Mars square Saturn. Planting, transplanting is going to make you sweat. It's going to get some of that energy out. It's something you can do in the physical world as a form of mediation, to move through the frustration. But it's also a really good way of claiming leadership and claiming responsibility and being like, nope, this is happening. We're making it happen. And I absolutely recommend adorning, embracing, celebrating, activating your sex and pleasure organs and your waste production and waste management organs, because that's what Scorpio is all about. So yes, vajazzling is 100% a holy act right now. Enjoy. Your witch has said so. And then when our moon moves into Capricorn a couple of days later, that gibbous moon, we are activating and stimulating and adorning the skin, the hair, the nails, and the bones. And so if that's just like, hey, calcium supplements, cool, lovely. But also, again, the tattooing on a day like that would be very holy, or using the glittery lotion that your roommate always hides. Go steal it. No, don't steal. Go ask. They'll probably say yes. Um, that stuff. It's really good. And it sits very nicely with the stuff that we're doing in that gibbous moon in Capricorn. Like I said, we are growing our self-respect in that place. We are coming into understanding what all of this struggle is for, right? And how much of a badass am I? How much of a badass are you to step into that work, to embrace that power, and to also embrace kind of all of the demons that come along with it, as like a the antiquated way of saying, the shadow work that comes along with being a powerful person or accepting where you have power and agency. That comes along with all of the shadow work of, oh, I could get away with this and get away with that. And Capricorn is like, no, man, let's build something to last. Capricorn also, though, is thinking about borders and thinking about fences and thinking about containers. And so our gibbous moon in Capricorn is also saying, let me be very clear on what exactly is mine to take care of. And let me do it with flair, and let me do it with brash and, pomp, and let me put it out in the front yard where the neighbors can be envious and be like, oh my God, I love your thing. Wow. But then also let me be very clear on what is not in my yard, what's not my responsibility today to deal with. That also is a big part of us being um, good leaders and holding our responsibility wisely, is knowing what is in fact our responsibility and what is not. And Capricorn moons can help us really get clear on that stuff. As I say every week, I am not a doctor of the human corpus. I am a doctor of witchery and whatnotery. So don't listen to me, some lady on the internet, yelling about how to take care of your body. Check with your trusted health advisor if you are wanting to integrate any of this information from this lunar guide. I actually have that memorized. I don't have that written down anywhere. I say it every week because I'm weird. This is also a really great moon and week for showing off your skills and making sure that people know who you are and what you are capable of. As a means of sort of saying to yourself, I am worth what I charge. I know what I'm doing, and this is what it costs, and this is good. Or, whether that's a monetary charge or an energetic charge, whatever it is. That's our astrology for the week. That's it. We have nothing else until we hit the full moon. So we are on our way to the full moon in Aquarius on, what is that, the 14th, I believe? No, the 11th. What is 14th? Full moon on the 11th on next Thursday. So allow this week to, in whatever ways are safe and healthy for you, bring up some funky business, sit with yourself, have a little tantrum if you need to, put on some glitter lotion and get it figured out, kid. Okay, this is witchcraft and it's not pretty. Okay, let's move into talking about some tarot. Okay, a card that I think can help us with this stuff, or some cards that I think can help us with this stuff in general throughout Lughnasadh season, but in particular the Leo portion of Lughnasadh season, I think it's very potent for us to have the Sun card and the Strength card out on our altars, our work tables, wherever it is that we have a magical or spiritual focus or psychological focus in our house, or workspace, or however it is that you do your jam. Okay, look, listen, whatever it is, where you're putting the tarot cards, put them there. These are the ones. Sun, because it is the ruler of Leo. Strength, because that is the card that connects us to the sign of Leo. And in the Strength card, we're seeing a, for lack of a better word, an angelic creature with an infinity symbol over their head, reaching down and holding open the mouth of a lion. And they're in the valley, they're on the ground. In many decks, the human is depicted in a white, like a pure white, colorless robe, or they're depicted totally naked or in a translucent outfit of some kind. And they're always almost always interacting with the mouth of the lion in particular. Oftentimes there is a garland of roses tying the two together, or, lots of red roses nearby. And the person is usually barefoot, and they're both like right there standing on the ground. And ultimately what this card is talking about is understanding the power of the lion, the animal power, the raw power of this creature, and saying, cool, but we have to refine this. We have to elevate this. We have to bring enlightenment into this. We can't just go through the world pursuing our most base desires if we're going to get the most out of this lifetime. At some point, we need to come into alignment with our higher drives and our higher motivations and higher goals, the things that we could do with the life, right? Not just what can we do, but what could we do. Um, and the sun is, obviously source, right? Radiance, joy, love, total victory. Not necessarily. But the sun card really represents a process of us going through some major ordeals, setbacks, disappointments, tragedy, confusion, and ultimately making it through. And not just making it through, but coming out of it with a renewed sense of vigor, a renewed sense of life and vitality, um, and a renewed connection to our own power and our own capacity. And there we go, right? That's Lughnasadh season in a nutshell, is those two guys. So those are really great cards for us to work with throughout Lughnasadh season, and again, in particular, through the Leo portion of Lughnasadh season. But while we're working through Leo, we can also work with the minor arcana. And at the beginning of Leo, we can work with the Five of Wands, and in this week, we can be working with the Six of Wands. And I think that this card is very timely with the astrology, the lunar phases that we have, because that's going to be different every year, right? We don't know what lunar phase we're going to get when necessarily. And so the Six of Wands is represented in some systems by the idea of Jupiter in Leo. Jupiter's not in Leo right now. This is just a magical correlation that some people make with this card. But in this card, what are we looking at? Well, I'm looking at a copy of the Smith-Waite tarot deck. This was more or less the first deck to illustrate the minor arcana. So I'm always intrigued at the way that Pixie or Pamela Coleman Smith decided to depict the ideas behind these cards. And y'all have probably heard me say this before, but I'll say it again. I think of the major arcana as these like epiphany moments, these aha moments. It's the moment of the miracle. It's the moment of rapture, the enlightenment, the like idea, the light bulb goes off. Oh, okay, I see the vision. And then the minor arcana is how we're actually going to live that thing. Like what's going to happen here in the physical world or the psychological world or the emotional world, right? So what are we doing in the Six of Wands? Well, we're just coming out of the Five of Wands. My favorite meme about the Five of Wands is, you've got this group of people just like waving wands in all directions, and underneath it says "stupid tent," which I think is hilarious because I love to camp, and yet also tents are there to destroy our faith in ourselves, 100%. So in the Five of Wands, we've had a confusing experience that probably took up a lot of energy. And now in the Six of Wands, we have maybe an even more confusing situation. Everybody has a weird look on their face. If you can see a person's face in this card, they have a weird look on their face, including the horse. Even the horse is like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. This is weird. And so what's up? Well, in the Suit of Wands, we are doing the work of trying on a bunch of different hats, aka roles in our life, aka archetypal concepts of self, and seeing how they fit. Am I a hobo? Am I going to be a parent? Am I a goth? What am I? How do I want to move through the world? How do I want to be perceived by people? That's what's happening in the Suit of Wands. And by the time we get to the sixes, we're like dead in the center of the suit. And we all at the same time can feel like we maybe are a little underwhelmed with the number of roles that we are playing in our lives, and overwhelmed by what those roles are asking from us. And we might be feeling the pinch of, if only I could move to another country, I would be this kind of person. Or if only I could have this kind of job, I'd be this kind of person. Or if only I dated these sorts of people, I could be this kind of person. And at the same time, looking at the roles that we are currently playing and feeling overwhelmed by them and feeling like, I don't know if I like any of this stuff. This is asking too much of me. I'm not sure I'm suited to this. These guys are projecting this onto me, and I don't think it's true about myself, or I'm afraid to embrace that, or whatever. So the Six of Wands can be a really confusing place, and it can be a place where we are really questioning who we are, the power that we have, the capacity that we have in our life, and at the same time, wanting more option, right? Like confused by what we have and looking for more at the same time. So I know that doesn't sound necessarily helpful, but but I think it is, because it's showing us that there are going to be portions of the process where we are very not certain, and we need to still act with a level of certainty. Um, and it's okay if we stumble a little bit. It's okay if our hemline is showing a little. It's okay if it's not perfect. It's okay. The idea is that we push ourselves to grow and expand into these roles that we have for us. Um, to an end, but we'll get to that later as we move into the deeper parts of the wheel. But in this moment, yeah, does it feel a little weird sometimes? Yes. Do these shoes fit? I'm not sure yet. I'm probably gonna have to walk a while and get a blister or two before I know for certain if this is the pair of shoes for me. And who likes blisters, right? But sometimes that is a part of the process, because that part of our foot is not used to getting rubbed on. I know that's a weird metaphor, but what I'm saying, but apply it to your spiritual life. um, time, the times that we live in, and this portion of the wheel are saying, "Hey, I need you to take on some leadership roles and some responsibility and make some things happen here." And I also know that that might not fit you perfectly, and it might chafe in some spots. I'm sorry. And also, the work has to get done. So I like hanging out with this card during this time of year because it's a reminder to me, as I grow into these roles, they are going to be uncomfortable sometimes, and it's going to be okay. I need to learn to have grace in those places, and to be able to maintain myself, maintain the work, and also to know what's not mine to deal with. In the sixes, there is a sense of limitation, even though it's Jupiter and Leo. I know Jupiter's the great expander. Sixes have a type of limitation, but they really work around a type of rhythm. And that might be a key word for you to work in this idea of, when is it right for me to step into this role, and when is it right for me to put it down for a little while? And maybe that will help me manage it a little bit better. Okay, now I want to talk about some magic that we can do in this week. Okay, witchcraft and spellcrafting for this week of Lughnasadh season. With our waxing moon in Scorpio and our even more waxing moon in Capricorn, what I think is going to be the most potent, looking at all of the stuff that we might be doing in Lughnasadh season, this is a great week for sacred sex, sacred sensuality with yourself or with other people. Enjoy. And in particular, near your plants, out in the garden. Don't get arrested, but go outside. Uh, go to the park. The bush. You know the one. um, you know, romping in the forest, romping in the desert, romping at the beach. Like, again, don't get arrested, but wherever you can go and have that type of experience, and summon that power, that energy for yourself. Um, Sex magic is potent. It can be really spicy. What I do not recommend for this week, especially with the other astrology, is doing sex magic with people that you don't already have a good bond with. If you already have a trusted and established relationship with that person, and that doesn't have to be a committed partner, that just might be a lover that you have consistency with, whatever, whatever the gig is. Um, I wouldn't go and try to find a one night stand at this time, or I wouldn't initiate sex with somebody to be able to do this work. Folks that you already have stuff going on with. And if that's not, then you, right? In theory, you're already doing magic with yourself. So there you go. Um, but Scorpio, obviously, a waxing moon in Scorpio, fantastic time for any kind of sex magic or sensual oriented magic. And again, anywhere you can get to an outdoor space that's safe and fun. And if not, just near the house plants, it's going to be good enough. Other things that we can do this week in ritual or spell crafting is seeking out harrowing experiences. Now, again, in ways that are safe and healthy for you. Harrowing might be emotionally harrowing or psychologically harrowing. But again, with Scorpio in the mix, there is something in this week that's like, I need to push myself a little bit. I need to step into something that feels a little dangerous or a little like for me. Now, one of the things that I might suggest is learning a monologue or uh, memorizing a poem and reciting it as a performance. I'm sure that that just freaked out a whole bunch of people, right? Boom, there you go. Harrowing experience. And I didn't even have to like put my shoes on. Um, but poetry is something that ties in with our Celtic tree month of hazelnut. It ties in with all of this Mercury symbolism with Velas or Volos. It ties into Lughnasadh season in general. Poetry is something that magicians and witches and heathens and pagans have used as a means of expressing themselves for centuries. Poetry is absolutely one of those places that magicians and witches step into as a form of writing because there's no rules and you can get very directly to the heart of the thing that you're trying to say. Um, so something that frightens you a little bit, something that makes you feel a little shaky, makes you feel a little nervous. That would be a really good spell to cast or ritual work to do in this week. Ancestor worship, absolutely, with Scorpio death work. And with Capricorn ancestor work 100%. And we know that we're doing lots of ancestor veneration throughout Lughnasadh season because that's the energy under the soil that's pushing up these golden grains for us to harvest, is our beloved dead that we have planted in the soil before we planted the seeds. And so any kind of ancestor work this week is really appropriate and very potent. Highly recommend it. And then again, anything that focuses on your skills. So you might be doing some spell work around attracting more attention to the skills that you exercise in the world, the work that you do. That could be, again, strictly and specifically doing spell work to attract attention to your work. It could also be around prosperity stuff. Capricorn moon, gibbous Capricorn moon especially, is going to be like, get paid? Hell yeah. Where do I sign? So this could be a really great week for doing just some basic prosperity magic. But again, prosperity magic from the point of, I deserve this. I have honed these skills. I have become good and better and great at what it is that I do. And so let me get some accolades. Let me get some attention for that. Let me get paid for that from the people that are utilizing my skills. Anything else that I want to say about that? No, I think that that's everything. I think that's probably enough, right? Other magic that we could do in general, especially with our waxing moons during Lughnasadh in total. Lughnasadh season is really great for protection magic. And yeah, protection magic. I was going to say some other stuff, but I'm not going to. Lughnasadh season is really, really good for protection magic. And so anything that's like bolstering protection, bolstering security around you and your family and your homestead, your apartment building, whatever, all of that stuff, very, very potent this week. Actually, there is more that I want to say, right? Of course, that's my brand, duh. We talked a lot about Mercury throughout this thing, and I did mention at the beginning with the tree month of Hazelnut that divination and wisdom and knowledge acquiring is really potent during this season, and it is. And we could do some of that. We could do some divination this week. But with the funky astrology, I don't know that I necessarily want to encourage you to do that. If you need to, ground yourself and be really practical and as grounded as possible in whatever it is that you're asking about or whatever answers you're hoping to get. Just try to be as like real and feet on the ground as possible, because the Venus opposed Pluto, I think, is just like a little too funky for this kind of work. So generally, I don't encourage it. But if you need to do some, just really, really ground and like really come into the most practical place in yourself and then ask your questions. You might also perhaps incorporate your divination work into your ancestor work if you have good, loving, trusted relationships with your ancestors. If not, again, I don't think this is the week for it. Even with all of that Mercury symbolism, that's why I'm recommending poetry instead, like doing writing as a sacred act, as a spell form, like literally write your spell as a poem. Oh my God, that's spicy right there. That's incredible. And we can leave the divination for a little bit later when we get into Virgo season, or just when like the air clears a little bit astrologically. Um, yeah, that was what I wanted to mention. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, if you are building your altar this week, or if you are doing spell crafting, making sure that you are incorporating the colors and the stones and the crystals and the plants of Lughnasadh season is going to make all of that work a little bit more dialed in and exact. All of that stuff is in the workbook. I also show a bunch of that in the class. But we might work with like blue topaz or marigolds this week, or oud, or amber. And then colors like red, gold, orange are going to be very, very potent in all of that stuff. Okay, that brings us to the wrap up. We have made it to the end of the podcast. Good job, everyone. Well done. Uh, this week is really asking us to look at power, how we deal with power when it's handed to us or when we take it, and what shadow work comes up for us around those issues, especially when it comes to wielding power to the end of getting some type of revenge, or getting what we're owed, or getting what's mine, that type of stuff. Not to say that there aren't a few motherfuckers that need to hear some truth in this world, but, you know, where are we tempted to go too far, and what would far enough actually look like for us with all of that stuff? Shadow work. It's potent. It's spicy. Okay. Our astrology for the week. August. Friday, August 5th, we have our waxing half moon in Scorpio at 4:06 a.m. at 13 degrees. And then on Sunday, August 7th, we have Venus in Cancer, trine Neptune retrograde in Pisces at 25 degrees. We have Mars in Taurus, square Saturn in Aquarius at 22 degrees. And then on August 8th, we have our gibbous Capricorn moon at 1:44 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at 1 degree of Capricorn. And then we have the sun in Leo, trine Chiron retrograde in Aries at 16 degrees, and Venus in Capricorn, Venus in Cancer, opposing Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 26 degrees. And then this work is leading us up to our full moon in Aquarius on the 11th, which we will obviously talk about next week. We are in the midst of fixed signs. We're in Leo season, and that's why our week is kicking off with Scorpio, which is a fixed sign, and then our full moon is going to be in Aquarius, a fixed sign. So we're kind of getting through the heart of summer with that stuff. If you love the podcast, you can support this work through Patreon. Thank you to all my patrons. You can leave a review on your podcast service wherever you listen to this. If you're feeling especially heathenistic, you can try out a little spellcrafting or meditate with some tarot stuff. And if you want even more guidance on how to work with this stuff in your personal life, book a reading with me. I do tarot readings and astrology readings, and I also do magical consultations. If you are in the midst of a magical project, working on a magical tattoo, any of that kind of stuff, hit me up. Let's talk about it. That's some of my favorite stuff to do. All right, my friends, that is the podcast. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I hope that it's been helpful in a new way, or as I said previously, in a refined way. If you are able and if you're feeling like it, I would absolutely love some feedback on this new format because I kind of dig it. As I was recording this, I was like, wait, I think I really like this. This is like really fun. And it also kind of feels like a mini version of the class. And that is extremely satisfying to me. So I want to know if this is just working for me or is it working for you too? Heavily, heavily appreciative of any feedback that I get from people. In fact, maybe I'll have a little present. Maybe I'll have a little surprise for folks that send me some feedback. You can email me through my website. If you are a Patreon sub, you can send me a message through Patreon, whatever is convenient for you. Really appreciate it. Feedback. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. That's it. Blessed be my friends. Good luck with this week. And if you do any spell casting, yeah, I'd love to get some feedback on how you feel about it. If was it successful? What kind of work did you do? If you want to keep that private, I totally understand that as well. But in general, good luck with all this power. Is it burning your fingertips a little bit? It's all right. It's just the sun that we're trying to eat. Blessed be heathens.